Hey, dear members of the Soul Story family, welcome back. Today we're diving into a heartwarming romantic tale that just might tug at your emotions. So buckle up and let's begin this journey together. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our meaningful stories. A gentle rain painted the cobblestone streets of Portland, Oregon in a shimmering silver sheen, veiling the sky in a damp, melancholy hush. It was late October, and the brisk air carried the quiet bite of autumn typical of the Pacific Northwest. Emily Carter, 29, stepped out the back door of Powell's Books, the city's iconic used bookstore, tugging a hefty black trash bag behind her. Clad in a faded yellow raincoat with fraying cuffs and soggy light brown hair plastered to her cheeks, she trudged along. Her worn rubber boots squelched softly against the soaked pavement of the alley behind St. Mary's Church. Breath puffed from her lips in ghostly wisps. She paused, eyes lifting to the crimson maple leaves trembling in the rain, clinging like her to fleeting warmth before winter's grasp. It was a rare calm in her hectic day of sorting books, chatting with browsers, and sneaking quiet reads in hidden corners. But the silence broke. A muffled, aching sob slipped out from the deep shadows of the alley. Emily froze, tilting her head. The sound wasn't loud, but its rawness pierced the quiet like a splinter. She dropped the trash bag, wiped her hands on her worn apron, and cautiously walked toward the source. The chill crept through her raincoat, making her shiver, but she didn't stop. Something about the cry tugged at her instinct, a quiet urgency rising in her chest. As she neared, the soft glow of a distant lamp lit a figure slouched beside a dumpster. A man, soaking wet, shoulders trembling beneath a once sleek, now crumpled black suit. His polished shoes were caked in alley mud, and in his hand he clutched a gold wedding ring, discarded on the pavement like a broken vow. He didn't lift his head, just cried, quietly, like someone trying to conceal a collapse. Emily hesitated. Her breath mingled with the rhythm of the rain as she stood still. She didn't know him or what had driven him to the cold, dirty alley, but she recognized the ache in his cry. It mirrored the ache she'd felt 7 years ago beside her family's graves, and 3 years ago, discovering her fiancé in the arms of her best friend. She had learned to survive not by forgetting, but by being present for others, however small the moment, and this moment was calling her. Without a second thought, she knelt beside the man. The cold seeped into her knees, water soaking her jeans, but she didn't notice. She laid a hand on his shoulder, as she had once done for lost children in the shop. He flinched and glanced up, eyes swollen and rain-blurred, then quickly looked away, ashamed. Still, she stayed. She gently pulled him into an embrace, not tight, just enough so he could feel someone was there. The scent of his cologne, mixed with wet earth and rain, left a strange, unforgettable trace. "You don't have to talk," she murmured, voice warm and quiet like a lullaby. "I'm just here." He didn't speak, but she felt the tension in his body ease slightly in her arms. His sobs slowed, merging into the steady rhythm of the falling rain. They remained there, two strangers cloaked in grief, sharing warmth in the darkness. Emily asked no questions, didn't need answers. Sometimes a quiet embrace could speak louder than any words. When his tears finally stopped, she loosened the hug. He still wouldn't look at her, wiping his eyes with a drenched sleeve. As she stood to leave, her gaze caught on the ring glinting under the lamplight. It looked small, shattered like a dream. She bent down, picked it up with chilled fingers, and without a word slipped it into the breast pocket of his suit. Then she turned and walked away. Back inside Powell's, the rain kept falling like a sad, silent lullaby. She stole a glance over her shoulder. The man hadn't moved, but the ring was no longer on the ground. Its weight now rested with him, a mystery she didn't plan to unravel. She shut the door behind her and returned to her world of worn paper and whispered stories. Yet something within her shifted, like the hug hadn't just been for him, but for a hidden part of herself, long forgotten. Inside, Emily shed her raincoat, revealing a plain gray sweater beneath. She pushed damp hair from her cheeks inside. Helping strangers without expecting anything back had become second nature. For her, it was the heartbeat that kept her going after all she'd lost. Emily, 29, was kind, but beneath her gentle smile were wounds time hadn't closed. 7 years ago, a drunk driver tore her world apart, killing her parents and little brother in a tragic crash on EUR5, returning from a camping trip in Tuke Forest. She would have been in that car had she not taken a weekend shift at Powell's. She lived, but sleepless nights and survivor's guilt haunted her. Then 3 years ago, just when the pain began to fade, it resurfaced cruelly. Her fiancé, Ethan, the man she trusted with her future, betrayed her. She found him wrapped around her best friend Sarah in the very apartment they had picked together. Emily ended it that day, returned his ring, and vanished from their lives. Since then, she found solace in Powell's dusty corners and worn spines. She didn't chase love or attention, but her heart remained open to anyone in need. Whether guiding a lost reader or packing boxes for children's libraries, kindness wasn't just something she offered. It was her way of staying connected to life, the only way she knew how to heal. The next morning, Portland stirred with a curious electricity. Rain clouds had passed, leaving mirrored puddles on sidewalks and the scent of fresh soil in the air. Emily stood behind the counter at Powell's, idly flipping through an old guide on Northwest trees, when Jade, her sharp-tongued, green-eyed coworker, breezed in. She slapped the latest issue of Will Week onto the counter with flair, her voice lit with giddy energy. "You seen this?" Emily glanced up, eyes catching the headline in bold. Tech billionaire Alexander Reed, left at altar, fiancé vanishes before vows. Beneath it, a grainy image captured a man in a sleek suit standing before a lavish but empty wedding table. The article revealed Alexander Reed, 32, CEO of a major tech firm, had been jilted without warning at a posh downtown hotel. Bride gone 2 hours before the vows. Jade chuckled. "City's gonna be buzzing all week. They say he's Mr. Ice, but this, bet he's a puddle now." Emily offered a faint smile but didn't comment. Gossip never interested her. Still, the name, Alexander Reed, echoed strangely in her mind, like a tune she couldn't quite place. She shut her book and returned to sorting children's titles for the Gresham Community Library drop-off. Outside, news of the high-profile heartbreak spread like wildfire. By midday, Stumptown Coffee buzzed with chatter as customers clutched oat milk lattes and speculated over the abandoned billionaire. Some joked maybe his AI bride glitched and deleted herself. On social media, the hashtag #, Reed left at altar soared, with paparazzi shots of him exiting the hotel. Expression unreadable, eyes hidden behind dark shades. No one knew he'd spent that night in the rain, sobbing in the arms of a stranger. And Emily had no idea that the man she'd held in the alley was the one headlining every feed. 3 days later, the doorbell above Powell's jingled. Emily, balancing hardcovers on a wooden ladder, heard firm footsteps approaching. She turned and her breath caught. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood beneath her, dressed in a dark wool coat. A soft drizzle veiled the cobblestone streets of Portland, Oregon, a gray mist blanketing the city. It was late October, and the chill in the air hinted at the winter ahead. Emily Carter, 29, stepped out from the back of Powell's Books, hauling a heavy black trash bag. Her faded yellow raincoat clung to her in the damp air, sleeves fraying, while her soaked hair stuck to her cheeks. Her old rubber boots squelched on the wet alley pavement behind St. Mary's Church. She paused briefly, breath clouding in the air, gazing up at the trembling red maple leaves, fighting to hold on to warmth. It was a rare moment of stillness amid her workday, sorting books, helping customers, sneaking in a page or two from a beloved novel. But then came a strange sound, a muffled, broken sob from the shadows. Emily tilted her head. It wasn't loud, but it was raw, filled with pain that made her heart ache. She set the trash bag down, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward the sound. Rain soaked through her coat, chilling her, but she didn't stop. Something deep within her stirred, an instinct she couldn't ignore. Near a dumpster lit faintly by a street lamp sat a man. He was slumped over, shoulders shaking, his tailored black suit drenched and rumpled. His polished shoes were caked in mud. In one hand he held something small, a gold wedding ring, glinting on the wet ground like a broken vow. He didn't lift his head, only cried quietly, his pain leaking through the cracks he tried to hide. Emily hesitated, breath mingling with rain, unsure who he was or why he was there. But she recognized the loneliness, the loss, just like the ache she'd felt at her family's graves, or the betrayal that ended her engagement. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, her jeans soaked instantly as her knees touched the cold concrete. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder, like she did when comforting a lost child in the store. He flinched, lifted his head for a brief second, red eyes blurred by tears, then looked away ashamed. But she didn't move. She wrapped her arms around him in a quiet embrace. Not tight, just enough to say, "I'm here." His cologne mixed with the rain and earth. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I'm just here." Slowly his body relaxed in her arms. His sobs softened, dissolving into the rhythm of the rain. They stayed like that, two strangers in an alley, held together by sorrow. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Sometimes a hug could say more than words. When his sobs finally stopped, she let go and stood. He didn't speak, just wiped his face with his sleeve. As she turned to leave, she noticed the ring, lying there like a piece of someone's past. Without knowing why, she picked it up and slipped it into his pocket. Then she walked back toward Powell's, the rain drumming steadily around her. She looked back once. He was still sitting there, the ring now tucked away. Inside, the scent of old paper greeted her. She hung her raincoat, revealing a simple gray sweater, and brushed water from her hair. That hug wasn't just for him. It was for her, too. A part of herself she'd locked away long ago. Emily, 29, was gentle, kind, but her heart carried deep scars. 7 years ago, her world shattered when her father, mother, and younger brother died in a car crash. A drunk driver hit them returning from a family camping trip she'd skipped because of a work shift. The guilt never left her, haunting her sleepless nights. Then 3 years later, just as she began to heal, came the betrayal. Her fiancé, Ethan, the man she'd trusted, was caught with her best friend in the apartment they had picked together. Emily canceled the wedding, returned the ring, and walked away. Since then, she chose quiet, life at Powell's, books over people. She didn't seek love anymore, but she still offered kindness to anyone who needed it. Whether helping a customer find a rare book or packing old paperbacks for Oregon's rural schools, Emily gave because it was how she stayed whole. Kindness wasn't her trait, it was her survival. Emily laughed, head tilted, eyes full of mischief. Under Powell's warm golden lights, Alexander looked at her like a man seeing sunlight after a long, cold winter. And though she wouldn't admit it, not even to herself, her heart felt just a little lighter. That night, once the stubborn coffee machine finally gave in, they sat across from each other at the break room table, steam rising between their mugs, and Alexander, unexpectedly, began to speak. "She left because she couldn't handle the pressure," he said, eyes on his cup, voice flat, like he was retelling someone else's life. "The media, living with someone like me, cold, distant." He paused. "I don't blame her, but I don't know how to be different." Emily's hands tightened around her mug. Then she answered, soft but steady. "I used to think I wasn't good enough. My ex-fiancé cheated on me with my best friend right before our wedding." She looked away, gathering herself. "I kept wondering what I did wrong, but eventually I realized it wasn't my fault. I got through it by helping other people, because when I focused on their pain, I stopped drowning in mine." Alexander looked up. Their eyes met, and for the first time they weren't just two strangers. They were two broken people trying, slowly, to piece themselves back together. When he left, the rain still fell outside, quiet and steady. Emily stood behind the counter, watching his silhouette fade through the glass. She didn't know what this thing was, this strange connection building between them. But something had shifted, not grand, not clear, just a spark, like Powell's golden light brushing the pages of an old book, enough to make her hope for the next time. As weeks passed, the awkward encounters between Emily and Alexander at Powell's books became something of a ritual, unspoken, expected, and quietly comforting. One crisp afternoon in early November, Alexander walked into the store with unusual purpose. He approached the counter, a ticket in hand, stamped with the logo of the Portland Book Festival, an annual event that brought authors, publishers, and thousands of book lovers together. He said it gently in front of her. "Come with me next week." Emily looked up, eyebrows raised. "You know I don't do crowds," she said with a faint smile. "Thousands of people packed into a convention center? Just thinking about it makes me need a nap." Alexander tilted his head undeterred. "I don't like crowds either," he admitted, "but I thought you'd enjoy the used bookstalls. They've even got a kids section, like the books you donate." Emily studied him for a moment. There was a spark in his eyes, not the usual guarded coolness, but something sincere. Still, she shook her head. "I'll think about it, but don't get your hopes up." He didn't give up. Over the next week, he stopped by almost daily, each visit armed with a new angle. An author she loved would be speaking, a rare import stall from Europe. One day, he simply stood near the shelves and asked, "Aren't you even a little curious?" Emily found his persistence oddly charming, and slowly, her resistance began to melt. Then one Saturday morning, he arrived with a different flyer. Not for the book festival, but for a small book donation event in the suburbs, a drive for rural Oregon kids. "No festival," he said. "No crowds. Just this." She sighed, setting down her pen. "Fine. Just this." He grinned, a real smile. "I knew you'd say yes." That day, Portland's sky cleared unexpectedly. The rain paused, letting sunshine slip between the red maple leaves along the winding roads. Emily sat beside him in his sleek black SUV, feeling slightly out of place, leaving the comfort of Powell's behind. They arrived in a small town about 40 minutes outside the city, where volunteers were setting up a donation booth outside the community library. The air smelled like coffee from a tiny indie cafe nearby. The scene was warm, unpretentious. Wooden tables, piles of children's books, a few kids darting between boxes. Emily felt her shoulders relax. She stepped out of the car, cradling a box of books she'd chosen from the shop. Titles like The Very Hungry Caterpillar and Charlotte's Web. Alexander, clearly out of his element, still helped her set up. His hands fumbled as he arranged books, occasionally dropping one for her to catch. "You don't have to do this," she said, watching him try and fail to stack paperbacks. He shrugged. "I didn't come here to watch." For a while, they worked in comfortable silence. Then a group of kids, maybe 5 or 6, rushed over, coats bright against the gray sky. A curly-haired girl, about 6, pointed to where the wild things are. "Can you read it to us, mister?" she asked. Alexander froze. His eyes darted to Emily, pleading. She just grinned, pressed the book into his hands. "Go on, it's not hard." He sat down on a low wooden chair, the kids gathering around him like stars around a moon. He cleared his throat and began. "The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind, his monster growl was more cough than roar, but it made the kids howl with laughter." Emily, standing nearby with a latte, burst into laughter herself, a clear, ringing sound that made Alexander glance up, mock offended. "What's so funny?" he asked, feigning a frown. But he couldn't hold it. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. The kids shouted, "Keep going, monster man!" And he did. Still awkward, still stiff, but trying. As sunlight streamed through the cafe window, Emily watched him. And for the first time, she didn't see the man from the alley. She saw someone learning to open up, one page at a time. The event wrapped by late afternoon. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky a deep molten orange. On the drive back, silence settled for a while. Then Alexander spoke. "I've never done anything like that. I mean, for people, with no gain." Emily turned slightly curious. "So why did you?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Because of you," he said quietly. "You make it look easy, like kindness is just the way people should be." She didn't answer right away, just smiled, a quiet warmth spreading inside her like the rare sunshine outside. A few weeks later, Alexander surprised her again. He arrived at Powell's not with a book, but with something bigger. "I've been thinking," he said. "That event, we should do more like that." He pulled out a proposal for a mobile library, a small truck, stocked with books, traveling to rural Oregon towns where kids rarely had access to new reading material. "It starts next month," he said, almost shy. "I'm covering the costs." Emily's eyes lit up. Seriously? You're not joking, he nodded. Then from his coat pocket, he pulled a small wooden box and slid it toward her. This is for you. Inside was an antique book press, polished walnut with delicate carvings, the kind she'd once dreamed of using to restore Powell's older, fragile books. Her hands trembled as she touched it. Alexander, I don't know what to say. You don't have to, he said, voice low. I just thought it belonged with you. When he left, Emily stood quietly behind the counter, still holding the press. Outside, sunlight spilled through Powell's wide windows, dancing across the shelves. And for the first time she realized, something new had begun. Not just for him, but for her too. They weren't just healing anymore. They were building something warm. Together. He glimpsed a brown-haired girl in a yellow raincoat stepping into a streetcar. His heart leapt. He ran, dodging puddles and startled pedestrians. But by the time he reached the platform, the streetcar had already pulled away. It wasn't her, just someone else in yellow, a color that now haunted him. Back at his penthouse, the silence was unbearable. Every inch of space reminded him of how cold he'd once been, how much he'd kept to himself. But Emily had changed that. Her laughter, her stubborn warmth, the way she made Powell's feel like home. He realized then he hadn't built the mobile library for the kids. Not really. He'd built it because she believed in it. Because through her, he'd found meaning. One night, unable to sleep, Alexander opened The Alchemist, the very book she'd left behind. Her note, "Find your treasure," had no punctuation. Just those 3 words, yet they echoed louder than any goodbye. And finally he understood. She had been his treasure, not a thing, not a dream. A person. Determined, he made calls, quiet ones, to contacts in Seattle, to heads of nonprofits, even asking the driver of the book truck to keep an eye out. It wasn't desperation that drove him now, but something quieter, deeper, a hope. He didn't want to chase her down to beg. He wanted to find her, so he could say what he never did, that he had been broken, yes, but she had taught him how to begin again. Emily looked up, startled. Are you sure? Alexander nodded, his expression calm but resolute. I've spent most of my life investing in things that made me richer, but never happier. This makes sense. If I can give up some control to keep the Hug Foundation alive, it's worth it. Emily stared at him for a moment, her heart quietly swelling. He meant it. This wasn't the grand, sweeping gesture of a man trying to impress her. It was something quieter, steadier, the kind of sacrifice people make when they truly believe in something, or someone. She let out a shaky breath, her smile returning. You know, most people would have just launched a GoFundMe. Alexander chuckled, the tension in the room easing just a little. I thought about it, but I figured the guy who once got lost in Powell's should probably handle his own mess. Emily grinned, then leaned across the table to squeeze his hand. We're not failing. We're just in the plot twist part of the story. He raised an eyebrow. And what comes after the plot twist? She shrugged. Usually something good, if the authors are kind. They sat there for a beat, their hands still linked across the papers and budget printouts and half-eaten takeout containers. 2 imperfect people trying to build something that might outlast them both. And outside, in the cold drizzle of a Portland evening, the Hug Foundation's little neon sign flickered on for the night, a beacon for anyone looking for warmth, for healing, or just a second chance. 3 years had passed since Emily and Alexander found each other again in Seattle. Now Portland thrived with more than autumn's colors. A deeper change had taken root, one that began in the narrow alley behind St. Mary's Church. Once damp and forgotten, it was now vibrant with murals, open books, clasped hands, and a sign that read, Hug Alley, where healing begins. The idea had come from Emily, just after the Hug Foundation launched. She wanted their beginning to be more than memory, a place where others could find solace too. Alexander, ever the realist, had made it real. Local artists painted the walls. He installed solar lights, benches, and space for strangers to leave hopeful notes or sit and breathe. Today marked the 3rd annual Hug Day, an event sparking kindness throughout the city. Powell's buzzed with voices and laughter as hundreds arrived, donating books, sharing hugs, and pinning messages to the kindness wall. The Hug Foundation stall stood proudly outside. Children from the mobile library dashed between book carts. Volunteers passed out voodoo donuts and Stumptown coffee. Emily stood in the middle of it all, wearing a simple gray sweater, latte in hand. She was no longer the quiet girl behind a register. She had become part of something bigger, a home built from the pieces she and Alexander once thought were too broken to matter. Nearby, Alexander knelt beside a one-year-old boy with soft brown hair and eyes the color of his own. This was Oliver, their son. Born just over a year ago, he was their miracle after deciding to stay together for good. 2 years earlier, they'd exchanged vows in a small East Portland chapel, surrounded only by close friends. Jade had stood beside her, still teasing, "Can't believe you married the billionaire." Their promises were simple: love each other and live for others. Oliver came later, a joyful surprise, wide-grinned and always tugging at the books his mom brought home. Alexander, though still reserved with others, had become a wonderfully clumsy dad, changing diapers, mixing formula, even singing lullabies off-key in that deep voice Emily adored. Hug Day wasn't just an event anymore. It was the timeline of their journey. As golden sunlight streamed through Powell's, Emily stepped toward Hug Alley, a small handwritten note tucked in her hand. She paused, letting the vibrant murals and swaying notes wash over her. The memory came rushing back. That cold, rainy night, kneeling beside a man who had crumbled beneath the weight of grief. She hadn't known him then, only that he needed someone. She remembered his quiet sobs, the trembling in his shoulders, the moment he leaned into her arms, and the wedding ring she had found on the ground, how she gently returned it to his coat pocket. Back then, she thought it was a one-time act. Now she knew. That hug had not only saved him, it had saved her too. She smiled, then scribbled, "One hug can change everything," and pinned it to the wall. Alexander walked over, Oliver toddling behind, a tiny book in hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Emily turned to him, then looked down at Oliver. "That first hug. If I hadn't done it, we wouldn't be here. No Hug Alley, no Hug Day, no Oliver." Alexander chuckled, bending to lift their son. "I think about it every day," he said. "You saved me, Emily. Not just that night." She rested her head on his shoulder, holding the warmth of both her boys. For the first time in years, she felt whole. Not just because she'd found love, but because she'd found purpose, a family, a way to give what she once needed most. 3 years in, the Hug Foundation had grown stronger than they imagined. With support from donors and volunteers, the mobile library expanded into Washington and Idaho. Free counseling sessions had doubled. They opened a women's center, offering shelter, skills training, and quiet spaces for recovery. Emily and Alexander kept at it, working side by side, balancing the mission and parenthood. Some nights they planned projects while Oliver slept in a crib nearby. Other days they brought him along, showing him that happiness comes not just from getting, but giving. As Hug Day came to a close, the sun dipped behind Oregon's hills, casting the sky in orange light. Emily and Alexander stood in Hug Alley, Oliver in a stroller beside them, clutching his tiny book, eyes heavy with sleep. They watched the last of the crowd fade into the evening. An elderly man approached, thanking them for the mobile library that lit up his grandkids' world. A young woman embraced Emily, whispering that the Women's Center had helped her heal after her husband left. These moments, quiet, personal, were why they kept going. Emily turned to Alexander and took his hand. "We've done it, haven't we?" He smiled and gently squeezed her fingers. "No," he said, "we're still doing it, and I'll be here with you. Always." Their story began with a hug in a forgotten alley. Now that alley was a monument to hope, to second chances, and to love that grew out of sorrow. Emily looked at Hug Alley, then at Alexander and Oliver, and she knew the truth. She hadn't just hugged a stranger once. Now she hugged the world. With him by her side,